So let's dive into this bold critique by Kishore Mahbubani on Western leaders and their view on China, right?
Absolutely. It's a fascinating take on how the West portrays China.
Yeah, his argument really challenges the conventional narrative, like, the idea that China is solely a threat, when in reality it's a lot more nuanced. It's almost
Yeah, exactly.
like he's saying, wake up, world.
Right. And he points out that these assumptions are rooted in outdated Cold War thinking, which really makes you question whether Western media and politicians are clinging to obsolete views.
Exactly. And it's not just a surface level comment. He argues that there's a deep misunderstanding about China's rise and its global ambitions. It's like
Definitely.
the West sees China only as a rival, when really there's a lot of historical context and unique governance that they're just, well, missing.
Sure, but don't you think that sometimes people tend to simplify complex ideas for public consumption? I mean, it's easier to label China as a threat than, explore the depth of its policies.
True, true, but Mabubani is pushing back against that simplicity. He's essentially calling out the blind spots and saying, look, you're oversimplifying and it's
Right, I
dangerous to
get
do
that.
so. It's like if you only have one lens to view the world, you're going to miss the full picture.
Absolutely, and he also critiques the way Western foreign policy is built on these assumptions. It's interesting how he ties that back to current global power dynamics.
Yeah, and he points to how the West narrative of being the definitive authority is, well, pretty outdated now. He
Absolutely.
even challenges the notion that Washington, or the West in general, should be setting the rules for international behavior.
That's really a bold stance. So, in his view, the perceived threat from China is more a product of misjudgment than actual aggressive intent.
Exactly. It's like he's saying the so called threat is mainly a projection of Western insecurity, and it's based on assumptions rather than concrete
Ah,
evidence.
definitely.
He argues that there's a whole different side to China's governance that the West often ignores.
That's intriguing. But don't you think some of this might be a bit of an oversimplification of its own? I mean, there is, after all, some valid concerns about, authoritarian practices in China.
Sure, that's a good point, and it's important to differentiate. But
Yeah, right.
Mahbubani isn't saying China is perfect. It's more like the West's alarmism is misguided because it's missing historical context and a balanced view of China's development.
Right. So it's not completely dismissing the issues, but rather um, saying that the narrative is overly skewed by a sort of Western exceptionalism.
Yes, exactly. And that Western exceptionalism often leads to policies that are reactive rather than
Definitely.
understanding. It's almost like they're playing a game without knowing all the rules.
I really like that analogy. So, how do you think this perspective changes the conversation on global politics?
Well, it invites us to re examine our biases.
Yeah, indeed.
Instead of seeing global interactions through a lens of threat, we might consider dialogue and historical context, like the idea that global power dynamics are far more intricate than just good versus evil.
Exactly that. It's a call for a more engaged and intellectually honest conversation about international relations. It makes you wonder if perhaps there's a missed opportunity for genuine collaboration.
Absolutely. And it sort of criticizes Western policies for their narrow focus on competition. It's like, hey, maybe we should be thinking about coexistence instead of just confrontation.
Makes sense. But I wonder though, while Mahbubani champions a more balanced understanding, don't you think his views might be seen as a bit too sympathetic to China's policies?
That's a fair critique, and it's something I hear a lot. But I
Sure.
think what he's really doing is highlighting that the West, by overemphasizing threat, ends up ignoring a lot of convergent interests between China and the West, which could be beneficial if acknowledged properly.
Right, so it's not about being totally blind to China's challenges, but about correcting a misinformed perspective. It's a kind of recalibration of priorities, yes?
Yes, definitely. And he even pushes the point that Western media often amplify a message that suits their narrative instead of presenting a comprehensive view of China's rise.
That's interesting because media plays such a huge role in shaping public opinion. Do you think his critique has had any noticeable impact?
Well, it's influenced a lot of discussions among scholars and policymakers who are now questioning whether the alarmist rhetoric is really justified.
Yep,
It
totally.
kind of sparks a necessary debate about whose interests are really being served.
And isn't it common for geopolitical debates to be like oversimplified? This balanced view might actually lead to better informed decisions in the long run.
Exactly, yeah. It's like he's urging everyone to step back from the knee jerk reactions and see the bigger picture, acknowledging that the world is now multipolar and that the West is just one piece of a larger puzzle.
Right on. Yeah, and that multipolar world is coming fast. I mean, we've seen shifts come and go, but it seems inevitable that the West needs to update its playbook.
Totally. And to use an analogy, it's like if you're playing chess with one set of rules from decades ago, you're not going to win against someone who's thinking
Yeah,
in
for
today's
sure.
terms. The global landscape has evolved, and so should our perspectives.
I like that analogy. A game of chess demands you reassess your strategy constantly. It really makes you wonder how Western foreign policy might change if it took Mahbubani's comments seriously.
Well, if Western leaders were to, dare I say, embrace this nuanced understanding, it might lead to more collaborative efforts rather than a confrontational posture.
Right,
But of
exactly.
course, that's easier said than done.
Definitely, there are entrenched interests and historical biases that make shifting perspectives a tough nut to crack. However, this conversation is a good starting point.
Absolutely. It's like opening a window to let fresh air in. You might get some unexpected insights that can benefit international relations overall.
That's
It's
true.
refreshing to see someone challenge the status quo so bluntly.
Exactly. Yet, I can't help but wonder if his perspective might sometimes downplay legitimate concerns about human rights or transparency issues in China's governance.
Yeah, that's a solid point to raise.
Yep,
Mahbubani
exactly.
does focus more on the geopolitical narrative, so while he challenges Western biases, he might not fully address all the complexities of China's internal policies or how those might impact its global behavior.
Right, so his critique is essential for balancing the debate but doesn't necessarily cover every aspect of the China conundrum. It's a starting point for further inquiry rather than a complete roadmap.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, here's a different angle. Let's discuss it more deeply, rather than, providing an all encompassing solution. And that
spot
in
on.
itself is valuable in such a polarized discussion.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a lot to think about, especially as global power shifts and new alliances are considered. It's a reminder that context and history matter immensely in these debates.
Yes, it does indeed. In the end, the conversation sparked by Mahbubani is about rethinking assumptions and broadening our outlook, which could over time lead to a more stable and informed international dialogue.
Yep, very true. Well, this discussion has definitely been thought-provoking. I mean, re-examining old narratives might just be the key to understanding today's complex world. Thanks for breaking it down. It's been awesome.